Now let's see here. No. No. Nah. Let's just stick with the old standby. You know, a change of scenery is nice and everything, but sometimes it's just best if you stick with what you know fits you most. I think that was kind of the case for the main writer of this series, Shoji Yonemura. He started off as a freelance writer before landing his first professional writing job for a few episodes of a certain cult anime about a guy with a big sword. Not sure if they offered him a job writing for the 2016 series, but yeah, I probably would have turned him down if I were him. After that, he wrote a few episodes of Pokemon, and then he became the head writer of the highly underrated anime adaptation of Monster Farm, or Rancho as it's known here in the States, and eventually settled down at Toei. A decision that we all ended up regretting. Yeah, I made a ton of jokes referencing how awful his writing for the Tyson films were, but really, pretty much all of his work in the Tokusatsu division has been below average at best. And yes, I'm including Kamen Rider Kabuto, which he was the head writer of. Now I realize this show has its fans, and more power to you, but for me personally, I think it's one of the worst of the Heisei era. And no, it doesn't have to do with the eponymous main character being OP Gary Stu or anything like that, as I even kind of like some of the show's early episodes, but more to do with how the plot just became a train wreck by the end. From its inability to pick a tone and stick with it for more than 5 minutes, to Deus Ex Machinas that literally come flying in, to just some awkward and awful excuses for comedy, it was just hard to watch sometimes. Now granted, a lot of Kabuto's problems weren't solely the fault of Yonemura. There were a lot of behind-the-scenes issues, from one of the female leads falling ill in the middle of production, another actor having other contractual obligations he needed to fulfill. It just had to be a really uncomfortable experience all around. And really, I imagine that applies for much of Yonemura's tenure in the Tokusatsu division. For most Tokusatsu he wrote for, there was always a sense of a writer that didn't like the environment he found himself in. And really, when you have a mentor writer who's referred to as the Frank Miller of Tokusatsu in one year, and an overbearing producer who's outright said he finds Tokusatsu to be juvenile, thank you so much for the second half of Hibiki by the way, it's not exactly the Ritz. Seriously, thank God these two have never been involved in Precure. Otherwise, we'd have at least one dead heroine every season. Now granted, I do think he still needs to be held accountable for how awfully his scripts for the Tyson movies turned out, but if his previous and current works on Precure and Pokemon have proven anything, it's that he does at least deserve a second chance. And as it stands, he's likely never going to return to the Tokusatsu division after Cho Superhero Tyson bombed at the box office. Seriously, this movie opened at 6 at the box office and lost to Kong Skull Island of all things. I'm surprised he didn't retire on the spot. He wrote the excellent Heartcatch Mirage two-parter, some of the better episodes of Sweet. And I don't care if they were glorified nostalgia rides, I really like Pokemon I Choose You and Sun and Moon 42. At least he does nostalgia better than Yuko Kakihara. His work on Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains hasn't been good, but I think that show was already past the point of salvation anyway. Now, when he accepted the position of head writer for this show, he said he purposely wrote the overarching plot to be simple, which, yeah, we did kind of see in the first third of the series, and was the biggest complaint I had with it. Still, at least that left us some room for some character-focused episodes, which he can do quite well, most of the time. Which is exactly what we're going to do as we open up the book to the second part of the Smile Precure review. Episode 19 starts up with the Precure's homeroom getting an assignment to look up the meaning behind their names, in particular, the reason why their parents gave them their names. Now, I'm sure a lot of us got this sort of assignment back in school, but in Japan, first names are really important, especially in how well they pair up with their surnames. It's not uncommon for parents to sort through dozens of names conceived by themselves or relatives before settling on one. If parents don't put enough thought into it, they might end up with some awkward names.
絶望先生
つけて書くな
For Yayoi, she didn't know the answer to that question, as the person who had named her was her father, who had already passed away. As a result, she wasn't even sure what the kanji for her name was. Her best guess was the month of March, the first entry for Yayoi found in most Japanese dictionaries. She also did remember her father mentioning the month when she asked about her name not long before his passing, but nothing else as she was only 5 at the time. She did at least manage to accomplish her assignment by giving a broad description of March's meaning to the lunar calendar, but she still didn't know what it meant to her father. So, even with her assignment accomplished, Yayoi felt incomplete as she wasn't properly honoring her father's memory. Thus, she tried asking her mother one more time for any clues. She didn't really have anything new to tell her, but did stumble upon an old gift Yayoi gave to him on Father's Day. This plus a convenient little Father's Day pageant going on.
Okay, Yonemura, I'm trying to defend you and everything, but you're kinda pushing it.
Triggered a memory within Yayoi of one of the last days she spent with her father at a church up on a hill. But before she could leave for the church, Wolfram shows up to crash the pageant and turn the fox origami Yayoi made for her father into Nakambe. This leads into one of the best fights of the season with some excellent animation, complemented by some very impressive looking rain.
I did say I liked early Kabuto episodes, didn't I?
Though bad subtitling here is it makes it look like Yaoi's telling her friends to stop damaging the gift she made for her father, which is just dumb. Where in actuality, she's telling the Akambe to stop using her gift as a vessel to hurt her friends with. Anyway, during the fight, Yayoi sees the church and finally recollects the remainder of her memories with her father. As it turns out, he named her after the month of March because it is the first month of spring, which would correlate with her mother's name. He wanted Yayoi to inherit her mother's kindness and in turn spread it out to anyone she meets. Inheriting the kindness of both of her parents, Yayoi found a new resolve to not only better herself as a person, but also as a Precure, even producing a slightly altered version of her facial animation in the process.
This episode, without a doubt, is not only one of my favorite of the season, but also one of my all-time favorite Precure episodes ever.
If you couldn't tell by the few clips I used, this was a far more atmospheric and somber episode with hardly any of the show's usual gags, instead focusing on the Precure's interactions with their families and Yayoi's melancholic journey to reconnect with the memories of her father. And as much as I like the humorous smile, I do think that as an episode focused on the passing of a close family member, they really needed to treat it with a proper degree of respect, which they certainly did. Though rather than focusing on the 5 stages of grief, they instead chose to focus on how we can remember the dearly departed through the gifts they leave behind.
Again, names are very important in Japan. My sister's actually tasked me with coming up with some for her future kids, and I've come up with a few, and after this review, maybe I'll jot down a few more.
This episode also adds credence to my belief that Yonemura just had a miserable time in the tokusatsu division, as 2 years after this episode, he wrote a movie where the show writers denounced the Heisei writers for daring to grieve for those they had lost.
Is it any wonder why Hiroshi Fujioka insisted he help write the next movie?
In any case, this is a wonderful episode and definitely one of Yonemura's better works. Thankfully, after such a heavy episode, we get a much more lighthearted Candy Shenanigans episode, and oh lord, what's wrong with her face?
Did that scare you too?
Anyway, Candy stumbles upon an invisible man camera created by Mazurina.
Well, just as long as we don't have to see a naked Kevin Bacon, I'll say this episode is great.
Which, honestly, it kinda is. Yeah, it's filler, but much like the Shrunken episode, they took full advantage of this concept to make for some great absurdist humor that kind of goes into Gravity Falls territory at times. And again, I think they pulled this scenario off better than Kevin Bacon ever did. At least these effects look believable. Following this, we get right back into the plot with it literally crashing right into Miyuki's face again. Pop returns to check in on the Precure's progress. They were only one decor short of completing their collection and restoring Marchand Land. At the same time, it also just so happened to be Tanabata.
Yeah, just don't mind the one with barcodes on them. That girl's still trying to master how to use QR codes.
Coincidentally, Marchand Land seemed to have their own equivalent to the Star Festival with their Pegasus Day.
Actually, going by MLP rules, isn't that more of an alicorn? Male alicorn. No, wait! Well, I walked into that one.
Anyway, in celebration of either holiday, they all wrote down their wishes. Meanwhile, the villains were also close to beating their annual quota with only 2 notches left in the Bato energy memory. However, Joker had other plans in mind after having taken notice of Candy's connections to the Precure's powers. Thus, he sent Akaoni to lure out the Precure.
Well, okay, I'm sure nothing bad will happen from here on out. After all, the girls and Candy have just been having so much fun this episode, talking about how much they enjoy being together and wishing they could stay together forever, and you can tell where this is going.
Sure enough, while the Precure managed to defeat Akambe and acquired the final decor, their victory was short-lived after Joker launched a sneak attack, stealing both the decors and Candy.
Bad flags and magical girls go together like weebs and figmas.
Luckily, the Precure still had one decor in their possession, as Miyuki had used it as an actual decoration on the bamboo tree. At the same time, they also stumbled upon Candy's wish cards, all of them expressing how she simply wanted to stay by the Precure's side. And with that little gut punch delivered, the Precure made haste towards the Bad End Kingdom to rescue their little friend. Speaking of which, Joker took the time to question Candy if she knew anything about something called the Miracle Jewel.
I swear to God, if it has anything to do with the flashlights, I'm out of here.
Thankfully, Candy didn't seem to know anything about it. The Precure soon made a stopover in Marchenland before proceeding to the villain's HQ.
ピエロとの戦いで女王様が眠ってしまってから皆もすっかり落ち込んでめったに家から出なくなってしまったのでござる。
So, Piero's master plan is to turn all of the fairies into neats? Is he the embodiment of the NHK?
Well, no time to think about that, as Joker had arrived to secure the final decor. He proved to be easily the most powerful of the Bad End generals, treating the Precure like his own personal playthings. They even tried launching an all-out attack, and yeah, that's not the kind of Miyuki face I want to add to my folder. With our heroines defeated, Joker decided to just dump a few buckets of salt on their wounds by verbally denouncing their efforts, and then mentally scarring them and the audience. Seriously, that face still haunts my nightmares to this day. Unsurprisingly, this left him in a state in which he was easily able to harvest the last bit of Bato energy needed to revive Piero.
That happy eye catch isn't cheering anyone up.
Eventually, the Precure did manage to regroup and began discussing their next course of action. Or, to be more precise, if they should even have a next course of action. No mincing words, Joker mopped the floor with them. If they couldn't even land a blow on a mid-boss, how could they even stand a chance against the final boss in Piero?
And you know, in a way, this kind of justifies the excessive amount of filler we've gotten over this season so far.
Aside from the occasional strong adversary, this team has been mostly dealt softballs as far as enemies are concerned, especially regarding the generals. Thus, Joker was nothing short of a huge wake-up call.
Now, I'm not saying it completely justifies all the filler, but it's an interesting thought.
Anyway, realizing that they were way in over their heads, the team found themselves at a major crossroads. They never agreed to throw away their lives in what has essentially now become a full-on war, so they could just go back home and live happy, full lives with their friends and families. However, doing that would mean discarding an important piece in their lives, an important friend who brought them all together. That's not what a true friend would do. That's not what a true Precure would do.
As silly as Precure might sound to some people, it's not something that should be taken lightly, nor is it something that's just given out.
It's earned, and while these girls formed their team back in episode 5, this was the first time they could truly be called the Smile Precure team. After arriving in the Bad End Kingdom, the 5 split up, with Miyuki going on ahead to rescue Candy, while the others dealt with the 4 generals. To give themselves the advantage, the generals casted the Bad End spell to buff their stats. In the case of Madrina, it gave her a super form that...
reminds us that Shoji Onimura is a horny old man. Granted, he's not as bad as his mentor.
Meanwhile, Miyuki made her way towards Candy. She almost fell down into some lava, but luckily thanks to some recycled animation from the opening, she was safe. Also, I don't care how cliched it is, I'm doing this joke. She does find Candy as well as the stolen decors, but also a yellow-nosed Akambe. We never really learn what this thing's deal is, but without her teammates, it's a rather one-sided fight for Miyuki. Said teammates weren't faring any better against their respective opponents. Still, having come this far, their resolve was far from depleted. The resulting fights had some fantastic Sakuga. Good thing they managed to save about 10 seconds worth of animation budget by again recycling stuff from the opening. But regardless, it still looked awesome. One by one, they managed to defeat their respective opponents. My personal favorite was now defeating Mazrina's clone army using the same tactic I use in most SRW games.
Good old map attack spamming. Seriously, Vilcus in the last 2 games was OP.
They rescued Candy, but just as soon as they dispatched all the mid-bosses, the final boss decided to make his debut.
Pennywise, I think you need to go on a diet there, dude. You're kind of looking as round as all of your balloons.
No, obviously, this is Piero. He's not the scariest looking clown monster I've ever seen, thank you Garo. But he was still more than a match for the Precure and their group finisher. Thus, it was time for a little upgrade. Using their newly acquired princess candles, the team transformed into their princess forms. Hey, Reika is sporting some awesome Saiyan hair, so I won't complain. Thus, they defeated Piero, ending his tyranny once and for all, and our series ended with the girls reuniting with their little fairy friend.
And that was Smile Precure. And you know, even though that ending was a bit rushed, I still have to say... There's still about half a season left. But they just defeated the final boss and everything. I mean, what else is there? They still got merchandise to show. Okay. Guess I'll just have to put this back in the cupboard for now.
The series continued into episode 24 with the Precure paying a visit to the still dormant royal queen.
Can totally relate. Why else do you think I wear PJs for all of these videos?
But yeah, for whatever reason, the queen wasn't waking up. To make matters worse, a certain someone was still at large. Piero and all of the Bad End generals had survived the last fight, the Clown King himself having returned to a larval-like state. Joker ordered his fellow generals to start recollecting bottle energy and supplied them with double-sized red balls to compensate for the Precure's new powers. Again, I like that the villains are adjusting their strategies to match up with the power creep inherited in action anime like this. It will come back to bite them in the ass later, but more on that later. Back with the Precure, they decide to hang out with the fairies, who were, understandably, afraid of the foreign creatures.
Well, for the civilians it made sense. For these guards, yeah, they're just a bunch of cowards.
I mean, seriously, is it any wonder why the giant clown almost destroyed this kingdom? Anyway, using some of Pop's Hengen no Jutsu, they temporarily transformed into fairies, and to complete the transformation, they decided to conform to one of the most frivolous of tropes, the fairy verbal tick.
For you, should it be something more cephalopod related?
But yeah, they ended up spending time in Martian Land, where most of its citizens enjoyed play acting overly abridged versions of classic fairy tales. You're supposed to give her both axes, you cheap old fart. Anyway, Pop Cell eventually wore off, and the fairies were initially scared of the much larger humans.
Come on, guys, you don't have to treat the Precure like they're freaking titans or something. I mean, they don't even look alike. Most of the time.
But the fairies did quickly warm up to the Precure, and they got along. Actually, maybe a little too quickly. I mean, seriously, all it took to convince these guys was telling them that they were working for the Queen and that they were the Precure. They even divulged information about the Miracle Jewel, the sacred treasure that's meant to protect their kingdom.
It's sad when even the civilians in Shrek have better sense than these picture book rejects.
Anyway, they learned about the even bigger MacGuffin of the series and how they had to acquire it before certain other parties did. And as if on cue, Wolfrun arrived to begin the countdown to Piero's second revival. Using the gingerbread house from Hansel and Gretel, he created a new monster type.
Too easy.
As I said, it was basically a combi with double the speed and strength, and as a result, much like the Blue Nose type, it could tank the Precure's regular finishers. In exchange, it seemed to be hard to control, even hitting Wolfrun during this battle.
A sentient version of the gingerbread house smacking around the big bad wolf. Why wasn't stuff like this in the Shrek sequels?
Anyway, they do defeat the cavity-producing house after they master calling forth the princess candles. And as an added benefit to them, since the Super Combi was made from 2 regular balls, it left behind 2 decors. Yeah, obviously this is a narratively convenient way of speeding things up towards the series' climax, but hey, at least it's somewhat justified. Episode 25, unfortunately, entered us back into the filler territory as the Precure began their summer vacations.
Well, nice to see that this has always been an excuse for the writers to take a few extra vacation days off.
Anyway, Miyuki got an invite from Akane to meet her at the beach. Anka Oni also happened to get the idea to go to the beach after seeing it on TV, and I just realized, That's an old analog TV.
Okay, I can buy fairy tale creatures going to war over plastic trinkets, but getting an old boob tube to work in 2012, you've officially pushed my suspension of disbelief show.
Anyway, after arriving at the beach, Miyuki found herself in the middle of a classic toy food competition. Again, just be thankful Toshiki Inoue didn't write for this series. But yeah, apparently Akane's dad threw out his back again. Jesus dude, do some yoga. Leaving his daughter and wife to take care of their beach hall shop. Likewise, Nao was helping out at her father's shop, putting the two heroines in direct competition with one another. They also each called in one of their teammates to help out at their respective shops, leaving one out as an outlier.
Actually, shouldn't you be working at Lemon right about now? Okay, last Squid Girl joke, promise.
Nothing really much else to say about this one, other than that it pretty much highlighted how these two are way too alike. It's an entertaining enough episode with a pretty good battle of the week. Oh, and also, Akone has some mad surfing skills. Continuing with the summer events, we get a festival episode. It's another basic filler episode with some fun moments, including Majorina trying to keep track of the Precure while participating in the festivities herself, and the main conflict of trying to rescue Candy after she's mistaken as the prize in a ring toss.
Yeah!
Yeah, I would have done the same thing.
They ultimately do rescue her by cheating. Okay, I'm starting to think that the girls who spend most of their time hanging out with fairy tale creatures aren't exactly the best role models for the kiddies. Next up, we get one of my personal favorite episodes of the season in which the Precure pay Miyuki's granny a visit.
Starting to think Toei has an obsession with portraying grandmothers as total badasses. Not that I'm complaining since we did get Granny Kikuko out of it.
This grandmother in particular proves to be a total boss when she no-sells the bad end spell, making this the only episode in the entire series outside of climactic battles where the bad end memory fails to move at all. She does this by holding to some very basic, yet very profound philosophy.
これから先ずーっと悪いことばっかだぞ。
生きていればそういうこともあるわよ。
ずーっと真っ暗なんだぞ。
天気が悪い日もあるものよ。
Really, you can't find any flaw in that logic. She's already lived a full life and found a strong sense of accomplishment. That alone is more than enough to carry her through her final years.
Again, I love stories like this and Hakuto 29 where we see characters either having found or finding fulfillment within their lives, because really, that's what we should all be striving for before we leave this world.
The rest of the episode is appropriately laid back, with even Wolfrun trying to take things easier before launching an attack. Apparently the thing that triggered his bad mood was someone or something bothering him at the lake, and that same waterbound creature later backed up the Precure, as well as something with a really strong fan. Again, not unlike things we would later see in Hakuto.
Seriously, with all of these Japanese folklore creatures, it's only a matter of time before we get a Precure Kitaro crossover. We all know you want to do a toy.
The next episode sees the Precure meeting at their classroom, as the Japanese school system requires students to take a half day out of their vacation to attend to minor club commitments and listen to faculty talk, and boy does this school system suck. Hell, even Nao seems to agree with me. Well, actually, she was scared by a book Yayoi brought with her. Yeah, it's another episode where Nao is afraid of everything, even though I'm pretty sure there's nothing scarier than the evil clowns. Still, to toughen her friend up a bit, Akane suggested they partake in a test of courage by investigating the scary urban legends at their school.
Oh, I know the perfect scare. You can have her play Corpse Party. Oh, I'm not saying the game itself is scary in any way. No, it's just gory schlock. I'm saying its sales numbers are the true horror.
Hell, this face Candy makes it scarier than any of those games, though she is also voiced by Sachiko, so make of that what you will. Anyway, Majorina tries to scare the Precure into submission during their little expedition. She managed to scare 3/5 of the team, but Reiko was her usual oblivious self, and Yayoi surprisingly expressed infatuation with the paranormal. I'd like to think the cowardly little magical girl was going through character development, but I'll save the analysis for later. Anyway, this did lead to some good slapstick, with the topper being another literal school fight, though Majorina forgot to give her monster legs.
Also, even though this was just filler, Yonemura for whatever reason decided to write this one up personally. I wonder why.
Anyway, the episode ended with everyone, sans Reika, realizing they forgot to do their summer homework.
Well, I'm sure this won't come into play in the next episode.
Cut to the next episode with the girls realizing they didn't do their homework.
Look, there's inductive reasoning, there's deja vu, there's language processing, there's deja vu.
Actually, that clip could apply to this whole episode, but more on that later.
Anyway, while the girls wanted to close out their summer vacation with a trip to the amusement park, they realized they had to rush back to their desks. But just as they were about to leave, Candy stumbled upon an odd-looking dice with a familiar-looking symbol on it. Yep, Madria's latest invention had trapped them in a game world. If they didn't complete all the games by 6:30, they would be trapped in this world forever, and worst of all, wouldn't be able to finish their homework! Oh my god! Yeah, if you couldn't tell by that synopsis, this is a very goofy filler episode, but still very entertaining. Each of the games led to some great comedy, with the villains trying to cheat their way to victory, only for the Precure to cheat right back.
I would say that they're teaching the kids bad lessons again, but no, this is consistent with most multiplayer games these days.
Eventually, they did reach the final challenge, which was to take a ride on the Ferris wheel and then say Miyuki's signature catchphrase after they got off. Sounded simple enough, but Madria delivered the most powerful blow the Precure had ever felt.
きちんと毎日やっていれば終わるはずの宿題ですよ。はい、ごめんなさい。
I love this episode.
Also, I think Yayoi has the best excuse for forgetting her homework. At least this Kamen Rider looks better than the one that came out the same year as this show. Reika managed to cheer them up by promising that she'd help them with their assignments, and thus they were able to escape from the game world.
Oh great, I see where this is going. They're going to pull an all-nighter, get their assignments done by the skin of their teeth, and then teach the kids that it's okay to procrastinate. Well, I for one...
それでは補習を始めます。私の予想をはるかに超える量でしたから。
Oh, they did finish their assignments in time and are being punished appropriately. Alright, good form there, Precure.
Now, earlier I mentioned that this episode shared some similarities with something else in the Precure franchise. What exactly? Well, let's see. We've got a group of Precure trapped in a game world that they can only escape from by beating all the games, starting with Whack-A-Mole and later bowling with living pins and then baseball. All of it wrapping up with a quick montage and a sudden boss fight. Yep, this is pretty much an expanded version of the Six Rangers Misadventures in Deluxe 3, which in of itself was basically a recreation of a scene from the Fresh Precure movie.
Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy.
Now, while this particular episode wasn't directed by Takashi Otsuka, he was still the series director, so it's very possible he provided more than a little input into this one.
Still, I do really like this episode, as they did change enough that it did become its own creature. But it is a little concerning that they are trying to recreate something from an all-time classic in the franchise. And it's only going to get more blatant when we near the end.
Episode 30 sees the team regretting the fact that they couldn't spend their summer vacations anywhere abroad. Luckily for them, they still had a means of traveling to foreign countries illegally.
Seriously, considering that the Precure are one of the representatives of the 2020 Olympics, should they really be encouraging illegal immigration? Trump is going to have a field day.
Also, where the hell are they getting all this foreign currency to go on these tours and, more significantly, paying for Nao's food? My best guess is from the one rich girl in this group, but even then, would her family just have that many different types of foreign cash flying around?
Justice Hero!
Hey, just be happy that there's still at least a few casual Tokusatsu fans left in the States, considering how Ninja Steel has been bombing. Beast Morphers cannot come soon enough.
The Monster of the Week fight ended up taking place in the Amazon, with Akaoni creating something right out of a trashy horror comedy. Seriously, anyone else remember this movie? Anyway, using one of the rare, useful decors, they transform into Minami Kaido prototypes and defeat the monster, even without a Christopher Lloyd to provide exposition for them. And with that, they managed to collect the last of the decors they needed to fill up their collection a second time. They expected that they would be able to revive the Royale Queen, but instead they got more product placement. Thus, we enter into the final episode we'll cover for today.
何ができるの？とにかくすごいアイテム。はあ、ほんまは何も知らんのとちゃう？
Come on, Candy, you gotta sell this thing, or else the toy higher-ups are gonna find themselves a new mascot.
As usual, when candy's of no use, it's time for some pop exposition, as well as the usual Miyuki pratfall. However, his intel was just as vague. Guess these two really are siblings. Luckily, the royal clock, as it's called, let them talk directly to the spirit of the queen. She told them that they still need to gain more power. Yeah, in other words, more repetitive fetch quests, cause even though they're going to recycle through some of them, we still got the cores to sell, gather.
You know, I realize that we're still waiting on a good Precure game, like an RPG or something. I just hope they don't model it after this series.
She also told them that they should improve their bonds with Candy, as if that weren't pretty damn obvious already. Meanwhile, Joker over the past couple of episodes had been working on creating a new type of Akambe. This time, a type with a black nose covered in the bad end paint that would allow the generals to fuse with the Akambe.
Insert your Bendy in the ink machine jokes here.
Sure enough, this Hyper Akambe again proved to be a significant upgrade from the Super type, being able to tank even the Rainbow Burst. To make matters worse, Joker, again, captured Candy.
Jeez, could somebody put a bell on this doggy?
Granted, this time he used a far more nefarious method to ensnare her. A small, closed-off space where the victim would dream of a perfect world, forever trapping them in an endless euphoria. Joker tried to make it sound like he was doing her a favor, but really, it was obvious to anyone that this was nothing more than a false paradise. After all, who wants to live in a world where you can't share your joy with others like your actual friends? And not a bunch of incubators.
Oh come on, you can't count that when that's clearly what they are.
Candy managed to escape Joker's ball of neglect, but the Precure were already down. Still, after realizing how important they were to her, the little fairy was going to do her part to protect her friends. Using the royal clock, Candy managed to reduce the black ball down to a plain red ball, giving Miyuki the opening to finish it off. And after this fight, it starts to become pretty obvious what's going on between Candy and the Queen. Thus, the episode ends with the Precure happily reuniting with Candy and...
Oh yeah, did I forget to mention this was a two-parter?
Wanting to rescue her friends, Miyuki allowed Joker to send her into the ball of neglect, swearing that she wouldn't fall under its influence. Cut to about 3 minutes later in the episode.
Gotta say, I am not a fan of this latest Bill of Yandere simulator.
Thankfully, Candy followed her, and oh Jesus, I need every available adult. Seriously, forget the body snatchers with the super speed. This is by far the most terrifying script Yonemura has ever written. Thankfully, using a lesson about sharing Miyuki taught her in the last episode, Candy managed to snap her pigtailed friend out of her trance. However, there was still the little matter of all of her friends who had already eaten all of Kaoru-chan's special donuts.
Phrase it.
But before Miyuki could do something that might get this video demonetized, if it hasn't already, Joker arrived to negate her efforts. He summoned a giant worm Akambe, and no, I'm not going to do that joke. This particularly creepy Akambe proves to be too much for Miyuki to handle alone. Joker even took this time to gloat, again pointing out how everyone could just live fun, amicable lives in this little dimension. They could just forget about all of their past misfortunes. They'd never have to deal with anyone looking down on them. They wouldn't even have to worry about tomorrow, as every day would be fun all the time. Yeah, to hell with that noise.
You know, it's moments like these that remind me why I'm a part of the Precure fandom.
People will always encounter hardships. Facing them head on and overcoming them makes people stronger. And even if misfortune is inevitable, it doesn't mean we have to face it alone. With that, the Precure escaped the ball of neglect. Joker tried to defeat them by converting his Akambe into a hyper. Don't know why he didn't open with that. But the Precure countered with their usual group finisher, augmented with the royal clock. Yeah, isn't it just so convenient that they can recycle most of this finisher? Thank you so much, Flash Transitions. With that, the Precure defeated the Akambe, collected the second what's now their third batch of decors. Again, hooray for repetitive fetch quests. And the episode ended with them watching the sunset together as they got ready for the next day.
While the second third of episodes shared many of the same problems as the first third, it also provided us with some of the best plot-driven episodes in the franchise, as well as evidence that Shoji Yonemura should probably just stick with Precure at this point.
Hell, even the filler episodes written by him were at the very least enjoyable, if not amazing. Same can be said for the show's secondary writer, Yoshimi Narita, a writer whom I both admire and am terrified of at the same time. Thankfully, the latter type of episodes wasn't present in this batch, and we got some more whimsical and heartwarming tales out of her, which did act as a nice distraction to the fact that there was still a generous amount of filler, though it was nowhere near as bad as the first third of the series. For one, there was less of it, and two, they were at least good filler. As I mentioned, some of it was hilarious, but more importantly were the filler episodes that furthered the series' main theme of finding happiness. I'll save exploring that for next time. Overall though, this was definitely the part of the series where the Smile team needed to mature the most. While the goofier moments did kinda distract from this, we can't forget that these girls are essentially soldiers in a war. They are under a lot of stress on top of their everyday commitments to the point that, yeah, it does kinda make sense that Joker would be able to easily brainwash them. I think the Ball of Neglect had the power to bring a person's stress to the forefront, putting them in a state where they would want to run away to Fruity Land to forget about all their worries. That would also explain why Candy was able to break out of it relatively easily, as while she does have her doubts, her baggage is nowhere near as heavy as her friends, which we will see more of in the series' final stretch. Distracting filler aside, this series' main plot is starting to pick up major steam. Let's see where they end up taking it next time when we conclude this series.
The third and final part of these reviews will be up hopefully sooner than it took to make this one. Sorry, I've been working through some personal matters as well, but look forward to it, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and say, how does Sun and Moon do to be continues? Yeah, let's just stick with the old one. Stick with what you know, as I said.